Good afternoon. The Munich Manual, named for its current location in the Bavarian State Library in Munich, is a bound manuscript created during the 15th century, consisting of 156 folios. It is a relatively small book, measuring 21 centimeters high and 14.6 centimeters wide. The writing support is paper, and as you can see here, the book has a very simple binding without title or author listed on the exterior. It is only by opening the text and flipping through the pages that one can begin to get an idea of what the subject matter might be, and as you may have already deduced, this is a manual for demonic magic or necromancy. The subject matter may remind you of my first topic, the Greek magical papyri, and indeed there are techniques found throughout the Munich Manual which echo those found in the papyri. Today in particular, I will be focusing on the use of magic circles. While drawings of magic circles do appear in the Greek magical papyri, I had not listed them in their own category of image, but instead grouped them under illustrations of instructions, as they appear only in conjunction with instructions for spells. Given that the magic circles are practically the only illustration of the Munich Manual, my curiosity was sparked. Today, I will begin with a brief overview of the Munich Manual and what can be determined about its origin and use. I will then delve into the concept of magic circles, tracing their use through different periods and cultures, eventually focusing more closely on the differences and similarities of their use in the Greek magical papyri and the Munich Manual. I must first begin by praising the work of Richard Kieckhefer, the author of the book Forbidden Rites, A Necromancer's Manual of the 15th Century. This book is completely dedicated to the study of the Munich Manual. It ended up being an invaluable source for my research, as this manuscript is fairly underused in the study of the history of magic. One very interesting aspect regarding the Munich Manual is the unknown provenance and author. The first two folios, which may have contained some information about the content or author, are missing, and Kieckhefer hypothesizes that this might explain how this book survived without being destroyed during the witch trials which took place across Europe in the following centuries. The persecution of witches became a sort of craze throughout the colonies in America and Europe, and has since been a focal point of the public's imagination regarding magic in the early modern period, as we can see through the numerous depictions of witchcraft in art, cinema, and literature. However, in this period, it was commonly men who filled the role of the magician, some working for the elite, performing astrology or acting as the court physician. Here, like in ancient Egyptian times, we see that the role of a doctor and magician were filled by the same person, and this position was tolerated, if not outright accepted, by society. Regarding the magic found in the Munich Manual, necromancy, this is a type of magic that centers on the control of demons. Kieckhefer proposes that it would not have been the court magicians performing the magic found in this manual, but members of the clergy instead. While we tend to think of the church as the driving force behind the persecution of magic, there are accounts of members of the clergy having access to magical texts and performing necromancy, such as in Nicholas Thorne's Chronicle of St. Augustine's Abbey. Regarding the Munich Manual in particular, Kieckhefer supports his claim that it would have been made by and for a member of the clergy by noting the use of the Latin language, which was mainly in use by the clergy at this point in time, and the author's clear familiarity with the liturgy and ritual. Here is a spell for conjuring spirits. Thanks to Kieckhefer's very helpful transcription of the Latin text, we can take this opportunity to work through a bit of the text itself, which is written with a number of abbreviations. This symbol here is et, and these two letters here together make the word post. This symbol after the P is called a suspension, and it indicates that the end of the word has been cut off. Here we have hec, with a ligature of the letters E and C here. This word stans is one of the more straightforward words that we have. These three characters together here make up the word contra. It starts with this abbreviation mark, which originates from the Tironian notes. It stands in for con or cum. Then we see the letter T. This symbol here indicates that there is a missing RA. So the whole word together is contra. While the abbreviation for con and the suspension mark here seem to be similar, it should be noted that the suspension mark is raised while the abbreviation for con is written on the same level as the text. This word here is orientem. These two lines over the E in the middle and the E at the end are called macrons and indicate a missing N and M respectively. This next word is extra, again with the symbol for the missing RA. Here the word circulum starts with C and then a ligature of I and R, and here we have CULU, again with another macron indicating the missing M. I believe this mark here to actually be a mistake by the scribe or the author. The text is then fairly straightforward. We have dicat, VIJ, which means 7, PS, which is a standard abbreviation for psalms or salmos, cum, again with the macron indicating the missing M, letania. The author of this text requires the necromancer to recite the 7 psalms and the litany without writing out these whole texts. Therefore, one could assume, as Kieckhefer does, that the author and the reader are already familiar with these texts. Based on these two factors and the general involvement of the clergy with magic, Kieckhefer makes the assumption that the text was written by a member of the clergy. In addition to providing this insight into the author's background, an analysis of the contents of the text and the script itself can reveal another very important factor about the Munich Manual. It is not a single cohesive text, but instead a compilation of many written by many different authors. These are 3 pages from the Munich Manual, and at first sight we can easily determine that the texts are written by different people. But for a closer comparison, we can look at such letters such as D, A, and P. In 7V, we have D with a closed, slanted, but straight ascender, while in 114V they are still closed but significantly curved. In 152, we see that the ascender now has a loop. For the letter A, we see that in 7V, the writer uses the 2-story form, while the authors of 114 and 152 have moved to the single-story form, as we can see here and here. The P, we can see, is closed in 152 and 114, for example here, while it remains open at the top in 7V, such as here. The majority of the manual is written in the script that we see here in 7V, which is called the Northern Hybrid script, a script very common in Germany in the 15th century. It is a Gothic hybrid, which tends to lean more towards the characteristics of the Gothic cursive. We know that it is Gothic because of the heaviness and compactness of the script. Additionally, given the time period of the manuscript, around 1450, the use of the uncial D tells us that it is neither Caroline nor humanist. Another clue is the high number of abbreviations as we saw in the previous passage, specifically the abbreviation for con or cum with the backwards C figure. The fact that the descenders of the F and the straight S go below the baseline lean us more towards the cursive side of the spectrum, in addition to the very interesting forms of the P, which looks open at the top. However, as you can see here, the ascenders of the L's and of the B's do not have loops, and the A still has 2 stories, which are all characteristic of the Gothic textura. As a result, what we have is called the bastard or hybrid script. I would venture to label it as the Northern hybrid based on the tendency for the final minim, as we can see here in this M, to have the uptick to the right. As you can see, the uncertainty of the manuscript's author and provenance makes this a complicated text to work with, but the fact that someone took the time to compile this book from these different sources gives us an indication of what information, rituals, and text necromancers of the 15th century valued. The magic found within this book is sourced from Jewish, Arabic, and Greek traditions. It contains ancient traditions which were used across cultures throughout the millennia, and one of these is the magic circle. I would venture to say that when asked to envision a magic ritual, the average person would picture something a little bit like this: darkness, burning candles, and inevitably a circle either drawn or formed by the people performing the ritual. As we will see, the inclusion of a magic circle is not a new idea, but instead a traditional part of magic rituals, one which I will argue spans back even as far as the Old Kingdom, around 1650 BC. We turn first to ancient Greece. In Homer's Odyssey and Apollonius Rhodes' Argonautica, we have 2 accounts of pits being dug in order to communicate with the underworld. Here we see Odysseus meeting his deceased friend Elpenor in the underworld, after having dug a pit with his sword and poured libations around it in a circle. In Apollonius's account of Jason's adventures, Jason is tasked by Medea to dig a round pit where he should sacrifice a ewe to Hecate, a goddess of the underworld, and pour out a libation to her. While Homer does not give a description of the shape of the pit Odysseus dug, Daniel Ogden argues that it was probably circular, given Apollonius's description of Jason's rounded pit, along with a depiction of the circular pit in this vase painting. He proposes that these pits were a sort of inverse altar on which people could give their offering to the gods of the underworld and either summon them or other spirits. In these cases, it is the pit itself forming the circle around the area in which the spirits are to be summoned. The use of ritual pits for communicating with the chthonic deities was not limited to the Greeks. The Hittites of the Old Kingdom would use pits to give offerings to the gods of the underworld, as well as summon them to perform favors, usually for purification rites. While we don't have descriptions or depictions of the Hittite pits themselves, we can imagine that they would have been circular as well, creating this link across centuries and cultures. Another form of magic circle can be found in the Aramaic incantation bowls used in magic rituals in Mesopotamia during the 6th and 7th centuries CE. The text of the magic spells was written in a circular pattern on the inside of the bowls, which were then used during rituals of summoning or exorcising demons. Finally, we return to the depictions of magic circles in the Greek magical papyri. Both the papyri and the Munich Manual are compilations of magic rituals, and given that we have visual depictions of magic circles from each, I thought it would be most productive to analyze how the rituals involving them changed or stayed the same between the two magical texts. There are 8 references to magic circles in the papyri, but only 2 depictions of the circles in the surviving collection. Meanwhile, there are 15 magic circles depicted for use in spells in the Munich Manual. Aesthetically speaking, we can see here some similarities in that both are composed of a ring with words written inside the ring itself, as well as on the outside and inside of the inner circle. These 2 magic circles show us just how complex each could be in both texts. There is no equivalent in the Munich Manual to the depiction of the snake biting its own tail that we see here in papyrus number 7. Various magical circles from the Munich Manual, such as the one that we see here, includes a depiction of the tool that should have been used in its creation, such as the sword which the necromancer should use to draw the circle, as depicted here. In an analysis of the contents of the spells connected to the use of magic circles, we see that they are used in a variety of different types of spells in both texts. However, Richard Kieckhofer has noted that the magic circles in the Munich Manual are featured more prominently and tend to be more complex in the illusionist spells. In the magical papyri, we see that there is a type of spell, a protection spell, which is not featured in the Munich Manual. Kieckhofer attributes this to the personal taste of the necromancer who compiled the manual, as there are accounts of protective magic in use during the Middle Ages. Another interesting factor to consider is where the circle is inscribed during the ritual. We see that in the Munich Manual, the circle is almost always incised on the earth, while in the papyri it is drawn on a number of different objects and only drawn onto the earth in one occasion. This marks a large diversion between the 2 texts, as we see the magic circles were used much more frequently in the creation of amulets or defixios in the magical papyri. With the circle on the ground, the necromancer in the Middle Ages could interact with it in a much more physical way, positioning himself and other objects in particular locations while performing the spell. This brings me to my final question. What purpose did the magic circle serve in these magic rituals and those across different cultures and periods? The drawing of the magic circle on the earth recalls the use of magical pits for communicating with the underworld in Greek and Hittite culture, as it could possibly act as a doorway or portal between the 2 worlds. In the Greek magical papyri, we see the circle acting as a sort of talisman to protect the owner, but also as a focal point of power. Kieckhofer notes that while different spells in the Munich Manual recount different aspects of the magic circles, they are mostly used as a sort of tool in controlling the demon summoned by the spell. Some stop the demon from entering the circle, others trap the demon inside the circle, but each are a crucial element of the spell. In the form, content, and purpose of magic circles in the Munich Manual, we see echoes of the traditions found in the Greek magical papyri, and also traditions found across diverse cultures and time periods. There is so much more this manuscript could tell us about the history and persistence of these traditions, with further detailed study of the rituals. Thank you.